Hi there, this is Sue Richey with Richey Real Estate, and today we're talking about insurance. I did an interview recently with Stacy Tucker, who is a State Farm agent. She's someone I've known for a long time. We used to actually sell real estate together way back in the early 2000s, and we have gone on to build our property management company. She went on to build a very successful State Farm insurance agency here in Northern Virginia. And so we did a little Q&A with her about issues that relate to landlords and rental properties. What kind of insurance should they have? Other things that they should think about in terms of liability insurance, pets, and so on. So hope this interview helps you and shed some light into some of the other questions that you might have about insurance related issues in your rental.
So good morning, Stacy, and it's so good to see you. I'm glad you could join us this morning because insurance is such a big thing that is part of our business and something that's really often asked, and people are really confused about what kind of insurance. So I'm glad you're here because we have a bunch of questions for you. I have Calvin McGettigan here, who's our business development manager. He is out there with our new clients and helping us to grow a business. So anyway, welcome everybody.
Thank you. Hello.
Stacy, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your company, kind of your background, how you got into the insurance business, and sort of just a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little known story, but Sue and I met many years ago when I started a career in real estate. And I think around the same time, we both went different ways of helping people in different ways. So I wanted to help people protect the assets that they were spending so much time obtaining. So I started an insurance agency in 2011, and that's what I've been doing since then.
Yeah, I knew when you went that way, and then I knew it just, you've done an awesome job and grown a great business there. So we have a few questions for you that we get often from our owners who are switching from, an owner occupied home to then turning it into a rental property, or others who are just simply looking to buy a rental property. So either way, they're kind of the same sort of thing, but I'll let Calvin take it away from here.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Stacy. And yeah, I have a couple of questions. What coverage should landlords be sure to have when they rent out their homes? That's probably our starting point.
Absolutely. Good question. It's a property insurance first and foremost. So the first insurance they would have is the dwelling coverage, which covers the replacement cost of the structure, fire, wind, hail, any damage to the property they need to have. So that doesn't change very much from being a homeowner or a rental property. The property is the same. The other important coverage they would have, though, is liability insurance, which is always third party. And I think people get a little bit confused about liability. You'll never get a check made out to you from your liability coverage. It's always going to pay someone else for something for which you might be negligent or deemed at fault, very similar to your car insurance. And then, okay, sorry.
No, okay. Well, question kind of deviating on that same point, but a little bit in a different direction. Why not just insure your home with a homeowner's policy? Like many landlords initially live in the home, so they think the same policy should carry over. Well, is that the case?
That's a good question. They're right. Some things are the same. The structure is the same. What's different is that they don't have as much personal property in there, right? If you live there, it's full of furnishings that belong to you, but once you don't live in it anymore, the very few furnishings belong to you, like maybe the appliances or something, and you might rent it furnished and have a few items in there, so that gets reduced. So that helps with the premium. There's another coverage called loss of rent. In a homeowner's, it's called loss of use, which means if the house is burned down, you get to stay in a hotel or a condo or apartment or something with food for yourself and your family. But if the tenant lives there and they can't stay there because of a loss, they're probably not going to pay rent and to go live somewhere else. So there's a coverage called loss of rent. Obviously, you have to show evidence of what that cost of rent is, and then the insurance company reimburses you for that loss.
Oh, okay, very good. And so, like, speaking about that, like, how much would someone expect to pay for like this kind of coverage? What's like the typical amount of coverage, or let's say, what's the recommended amount of coverage you would say?
Absolutely. So back to the property. The property is easy to get to that number, right? Because we have very sophisticated tools that help us determine what it would cost to rebuild the structure. So that is covered when we do the calculations. The loss of rent is truly that. it's indemnity. Whatever your rent was, that's what you're going to get back. On the liability, however, that what I like to call the difference between a finite number and an infinite number, right? What it costs to replace the property is a finite number. It's known. But what a person might sue you for, or for which you could be negligent or at fault, that number can get really unknown, and it can get really big when you get the right attorneys behind the case.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up often is well, there are a number of insurance companies that only provide liability insurance up to 500,000. Our management agreement requires our owners to have $1 million of coverage. Now, a lot of them don't know, and a lot of companies, like I said, don't. I know State Farm does offer $1 million of coverage, and so I want to talk about that for a minute. But also, there's a small difference between the cost of a $500,000 policy and $1 million, and people think that number is like, well, why do I need that much? And they can't get it from their insurance. So we often will recommend State Farm for that reason, but also the difference in cost is so minor. As you said, people can sue you, and if they're going to sue you, they're going to sue you generally for a lot, not a little, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that and about why State Farm, I guess, goes to $1 million, and what sort of, I mean, maybe not the exact dollar amount difference, but just kind of in.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Sue. The cost difference between going from 500,000 to $1 million, maybe $30 a year, maybe $50 a year, depending on some other factors. You can even go to 2 million. We'll go to 2 million. There are people, for whatever reason, who can't get an umbrella policy, which is something we could talk about later, but that will cover all their rental properties if they only want to have $1 million on the base policy. Right. So maybe $200 a year, or $300 or $400 a year for an umbrella policy. But on your one rental property, for example, going from $1 million to 2 million, or 500,000 to $1 million, it's about $30-40 a year.
Yeah, it's really just so negligible, and it seems kind of like that's always a stopping point and a question we get when people are reading through our agreement, and we say the same thing, that this is so small, and when you're renting, you have no idea what you're opening yourself up to in terms of liability, which is why we play a big role in a lot of people's lives in their rental properties. But insurance, anyway, so that's good. I mean, it's good to know. It's something we reiterate, but it's good to have that confirmed again. So I think, yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
Well, I had another question about rentals insurance, because this is something we require, but I would like for you to explain on your end. And why should landlords require and confirm that their tenants have renters insurance? What is your experience with that?
Well, that's a good question. And it's mostly liability. The landlord's coverage doesn't protect the tenant's items and their personal effects. So if there's a fire, their furniture and clothes and things are gone. But it also doesn't pay to put them in an apartment or something if they can't stay there. So the renter also needs loss of use. So on the renter's policy, it's loss of use, where they get to stay in an apartment or similar place in the event they can't stay there. And then there's also that very important liability again. Maybe the tenant smokes. Maybe they lit a candle for a bath and knocked it over and burnt the place down. Yeah, the landlords and property insurance will cover that, but if it's investigated and found out that it was the tenant's fault, the coverage can come from the renter's insurance policy. Those increments start at about 100,000, but they can very easily go up to 500,000 on a renter's policy. It's $10 a month, $20 a month. It's very small.
Yeah. It's we do require that for all of our tenants, and I think if you're a landlord out there and you don't have a management company and you haven't been doing this, you absolutely should require that and get some verification that your tenant did put it in.
Sue and Stacy, I guess this could be both your questions. So you're telling me if I, for example, had a friend live in my basement, I guess he's a tenant, should I require him to have renter's insurance to be in my basement?
Sue or me?
What's that? Go ahead, Stacy. You can answer that question.
Sure, no problem. If they don't own the property, unless they're a family member, there's likely no coverage for them or their contents on your homeowner's policy. If it's like you say, your friend, if there's a fire, his clothes, his furniture, none of his things are covered. And if he causes the fire,
right.
Now, both policies will probably have a claim, but at least there's some recovery from their renter's policy for some of that liability.
Exactly. I mean, if they're staying in the basement, maybe they're not paying anything. The payment of that isn't the point. I think the point is just simply what Stacy said, that there's somebody else, a non-family member renting the place, and they need to protect their things, their belongings, and their use. I mean, things do happen. That's why insurance exists. But
okay, well, final question. This will be me, and this we're going to a dollar amount, and this is. So how much does a renter's policy typically cost, and what kind of coverage is there? So will that just cover, as you said, in the case of fire?
Sure. So typical property amount, $25,000. There are some renters who've moved from a big single family house and they're renting another big single family house. So they may have $200,000 worth of contents. Even with that, I've not seen a renter's insurance policy exceed $400 or $500 a year, but a typical renter, it's about $120 a year.
Okay, so landlords should really
minor.
enforce that.
Yeah. I have a question for you, one other question on a different subject regarding pets. And so a majority of the population has pets. Many of tenants come with pets. Some owners don't want them at all. But one of the things that's been brought up is has been, and this may have changed, we've heard rumor that some of these insurance companies don't have this bad pet list, especially particularly dogs. They wouldn't be covered. So we always used to tell owners, make sure you check with your insurance company if somebody comes in with, I'm using a pit bull because that's probably the one that was probably highest on the list. Make sure that your insurance company covers those types of breeds if there were an incident. Is that something that's still there? Is that changing, or can you just talk about that at all?
So I know there are insurance companies that have breed restrictions. We don't.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought
presently. So your liability does cover, the liability coverage on your homeowner's policy does cover damage from pets, any liability, things like that. It is, if you have a breed that you have concerns about, you probably should obtain a separate pet liability policy, because you don't want to, a couple $1,000 claim on your homeowner's insurance policy. You know what I mean? You're building a claim history.
So the owner should take out a separate pet liability policy if somebody is renting their home who has a pet that is, a concern in terms of the breed. Is that what you're saying?
So the liability is going to rest with the owner of the pet. So let's say they're the renter,
Yes.
they have a pet liability policy.
Okay, the tenant.
That's correct. And I think, as you mentioned before, that you require your tenants to list the landlord and the property management company as an additional insured.
Correct.
So should some negligence somehow, liability has long tentacles, as you know. So if it reaches the landlord, there could be some coverage from that base policy for that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're saying, just to clarify, so that the tenant should, not necessarily, but could be a good idea for the tenant to get an additional pet liability policy in addition to their renter's insurance. And then if something were to happen, that would then reach the landlord, that also, because we have the additional insured and the landlord policy that protects everyone.
Correct.
Right. That makes sense. And we knew for that reason, State Farm does not have restrictions on breed. So that's a good thing, because a majority of people do have pets. We take a lot of other precautions in the lease with regards to pets, but insurance for that is the things to know that you could put into place are important to know. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I think this kind of, do we have any more questions, Calvin? Is there anything else or anything, Stacy, that you think would be important to share that we maybe didn't touch on? I know this is sort of general, but it's kind of a highlight. Obviously, there's a lot more we could get into and that people should dig into if they're considering renting with an insurance agent. But anything else that you can?
You said it, there's some of these subjects we could take a slice out and have a whole separate discussion on. But I think if people are just trying to dip their feet into becoming a landlord, I applaud you guys as property managers to make sure that they are doing all those things, because the individual landlord, that's not their experience. So using a property management company or some other professional that will help you make sure of that. Because I do talk to landlords and they say, oh, I think they have it. Oh, my realtor's making sure they have it.
Right.
then they don't, you
Right.
know, so.
There is
that's
a
what I
lot
look
to it.
at.
And it is scary for a lot of people. There's a lot of unknowns as you step into the world of being a landlord, and making sure you have adequate protection, and making sure that your property, your liability, your tenant, all of those things surrounding all kinds of incident, is really important. So they need to take the time. We need to ensure they have that, because that ultimately can come back to us as well. So anyway, well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. I know there's a lot more. I'm going to put all of Stacy's contact information and links to everywhere you can find her in the notes below this video. So you can reach out to her. She's right in Vienna, Virginia, and she covers, tell us what area, where you cover.
So I'm licensed in Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and I can write landlord policies in all of those jurisdictions.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you. Thanks
Thank
for being
you for having me.
Good to see you again. And
Likewise.
we'll take care. We'll send landlords and other people to you as well.
Excellent. Thanks so
All right.
much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I hope that was helpful for you. If you like this information and it's been helpful, if you like our channel, or if you're new here, then hit the subscribe button, because we put out videos like this every week to help landlords and provide education on a variety of subjects that can affect you and your rental property, and keeping you safe and protecting you. So if you hit that bell, you'll be notified each week when we put a new video. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.